They said I'd become the voice of the voiceless. But the truth is, I never even met the people I spoke for. My stories ran on every front page. Massacres, disappearances, heroes and martyrs. Each headline sharper than the last. They called me the man who made Mexico listen again, and I believed it. Until one morning, the phone rang. A woman was crying. She said her brother wasn't dead. He was sitting beside her, listening to me describe his execution on live radio. That's when I realized I hadn't just created a lie. I'd created a world that believed it. I started as a stringer for a dying newspaper in Mexico City. Coffee-stained desks, the smell of printer ink, and stale fear. Every night, I'd chase the sound of sirens, hoping one of them carried my name toward recognition. Truth wasn't enough anymore. Not here. Not when real stories got buried under bigger lies. The editors wanted blood, not balance. Violence sold. Hope didn't. At first, I told myself I was protecting the public, translating chaos into conscience. But beneath that noble excuse was something simpler. I wanted to be seen. The country was bleeding from every headline. Cartels, corruption, vanished students. Everyone had a tragedy. Except me. So I built one. It began small. A quote adjusted, a detail dramatized, a scene sharpened by imagination. And then, one night, the story that changed everything. The massacre of San Gregorio. Except San Gregorio never bled that night. Only my pen did. They told me San Gregorio would make my career. I told myself it would make the country safer. Both were lies, but only one paid the rent. After the story ran, my editor slapped the page like it had done push-ups. "This is journalism," he said, as if I'd rescued the profession from a burning building. The paper sold out. Stations called. A podcast producer wanted my process. Process. The word sounded clean, like stainless steel. It hid the dirt. The first week brought money. Not much, but more than I'd seen. The second brought invitations. Panels on press freedom. Workshops with NGOs. Emails from American universities promising airfare and applause. "Come explain the cartel state," they said. I didn't know the cartel state. I knew a headline. In those rooms, I learned the liturgy, slide decks, acronyms, a vocabulary that could turn fear into funding. Impunity index, transnational criminal organizations, structural violence. I spoke like I believed it. Sometimes I did, but belief is elastic when ambition stretches it. At home, the city kept screaming. Sirens, fireworks, backfires. Who could tell the difference anymore? Real victims shuffled into police stations with plastic folders and no lawyers. Their stories were crooked and long, and they came with names no one could spell. Editors cut them down to one paragraph. The country moved on. I stayed with the noise, slept badly, dreamed of faces I'd never seen, crying for people who didn't exist.
When the American grant arrived, it came with a soft threat wrapped as praise. "Your recent work demonstrates impact. We'd love a series." Impact meant copies sold, donors pleased, policy memos written by people who had never stepped into a morgue at 4 a.m. Impact meant performance. I met a fixer named Roman outside a taqueria where the oil never cooled. He knew cops, ex-cops, cousins of ex-cops, and one photographer who swore he could make daylight look like midnight. I didn't ask how he paid his debts. He didn't ask how I'd pay mine. We invented a rhythm. He produced whispers. I translated them into thunder. The second saga I built was a pattern, not a place. 3 towns, 11 victims. A signature of violence that could be graphed and mapped and sold as a trend. Trends feel scientific. They don't need witnesses, just dots on a chart, lines between them, a line through me. I called the series The Pattern That Power Denied. A TV anchor called me a patriot. A senator waved my front page on the floor of Congress with a trembling hand and a promising smile. He said, "This reporter has done more for justice than our prosecutors." I pretended to be embarrassed. Inside, something glittered. At night, the glitter turned to glass. I'd lie awake and count the ways the lie could break. A clerk who remembered there were no bodies that week. A police transcript without the names I'd invented. A suspicious intern at a fact-check desk who couldn't find San Gregorio on the violence index. Each risk felt like a coin tossed. I kept winning. Winning teaches you the coins are rigged. You keep flipping anyway. Press freedom organizations emailed requests for quotes whenever a reporter was shot. I would speak about fear, about the courage of the profession, about how we must bear witness. Then I'd hang up and look at the witness I wasn't. I'd tell myself the effect was good, even if the cause was dirty. A photojournalist, Tanya, joined me for the next story. She had eyes like a lens turned all the way to care. She believed. She bled on assignment and laughed it off. She wasn't naive, just stubborn about reality. I liked her too much to lie, but I needed her too much not to. "Where exactly is the camp?" she asked, as I pitched a piece on a clandestine militia. "Between municipios," I said. "Between municipios is nowhere," which can be anywhere. She nodded, worried. "Do we have names?" "Not yet. We should. We will." Roman arranged a meeting with a man who wore camouflage like a costume. He called himself Commandante. He drank Fanta through a straw and said the government worked for the cartel. "Which cartel?" I asked. "All of them," he said, which is the safest answer when you don't know the truth. Tanya shot portraits. I recorded audio from just below the surface of the lie. Later, I would salt the quotes with specifics he never gave me. A timeline here, a rank there, a phrase he couldn't have known, but I needed him to say. On the page, he sounded like a villain out of policy papers. In life, he was a man who liked the sound of his own voice and the sugar of orange soda. The story landed like a fist. The militia had a structure. The photos had a mood. The map had arrows that looked certain. Certainty sells. Within a week, 3 NGOs asked to build interventions around my findings. 2 foundations renewed their grants, citing the evidence base. Evidence. Base. I repeated the words quietly, as if they'd harden what I'd built. At the awards dinner, I sat in a room filled with tuxedos and careful outrage. The MC called journalism the last line. Someone lit a candle for fallen colleagues. When my name was read, I felt the entire room turn toward me. For a second, the applause sounded like rain. Then I realized it was a storm, and I was walking into it without a coat. Backstage, an editor from the States shook my hand. "Your work is saving lives," he said. "Maybe," I answered. "Don't be modest." I wasn't being modest. I was being afraid. The higher I climbed, the more the air tasted like metal. I wore success like a bulletproof vest, heavy, protective, a little ridiculous. I started practicing answers for questions no one had asked yet. Yes, I was there. Yes, I confirmed it twice. Yes, there are recordings. Names are redacted for safety. The lies rehearsed themselves until they felt like reflex. Then the families appeared. At first, it was a polite email from a woman in Tamaulipas. "Sir, you say my son was killed in El Arenal. He wasn't. He is at home. Please correct." I forwarded it to my editor with a shrug. "Confused reader," I said. We agreed to ignore it. Corrections are how a lie breathes. Silence is how it survives. Weeks later, I received a voicemail of a man speaking slowly, as if he were wrapping each word in paper. "You're talking about my brother," he said. "You say he was found in a canal. He works at a bakery. We can bring him to your office." I didn't call back. I told myself they were trolls. I told myself they were sent to discredit the story. I told myself anything but the obvious. My fiction had a pulse, and it was knocking on my door. Tanya began asking sharper questions. Why are the names always blurred? For safety, I said. Why doesn't the militia have a WhatsApp group like everyone else? They're careful, I said. Why does Roman never let me talk to his sources without you? He's paranoid, I said. She didn't raise her voice. She just stopped letting hours carry each other. A fact-checker from a magazine called late one night. He was kind, the way a surgeon might be kind before explaining the operation. I'm having trouble verifying the San Gregorio incident, he said. It's a small town, I answered. I know, he said. I grew up there. My mouth went dry. He gave me a pause long enough to confess into. I didn't. I'll keep looking, he said gently. When he hung up, I sat in the dark until the room felt like a question I couldn't answer. Roman sensed my panic and brought me a solution I should have refused. There's a patrol report, he said. Not official, but stamped. It mentions a confrontation near San Gregorio the same week. He slid the paper across the table. The stamp looked like someone had carved it during lunch. Where did this come from? I asked. A friend, he said, who has another friend. Is it real? Is your story? We looked at each other and laughed like men at the wrong funeral. I scanned the report and emailed it to the fact-checker. See, I wrote, it's a fog of war issue. Fog of war. Another clean phrase that obscures a dirty act. The magazine published. The applause returned. The fear stayed. I spent more hours in airport security lines than in my own kitchen. Panels, keynotes, off-the-record briefings with diplomats who lowered their voices when they said cartel, as if the word itself listened. They asked how I kept going. Faith, I'd say. They asked if I was safe. Enough, I'd answer. Both statements were salvageable if questioned under oath. At home, my mother stopped reading my work. She'd clip the front pages and stack them in a drawer she never opened. When I asked why, she said, it hurts to hold things that aren't meant to be held. I kissed her forehead and pretended I understood. An NGO organized a listening session. Families of the disappeared gathered in a community center that smelled like bleach and hope. I sat in the back and took notes I would never use. A woman held up a photo of her son and said, "We don't want heroes. We want answers." Her voice was clean. Mine wasn't. Afterward, a man with a scar on his chin approached me. "You wrote about my cousin," he said. "I'm sorry for your loss," I replied automatically. "He washes cars," the man said. "He's alive." I said nothing. He stared for a long time, then added, "You made him a ghost." The word stayed with me. Ghosts don't get lawyers. Ghosts don't get corrections. Ghosts make room for policy. I met Tanya for coffee. She didn't order anything. "I'm filing a complaint with the paper," she said. "For what?" "For the stories." "What about them?" "They're too neat." Neat. The worst insult from a photographer who knows the world is rarely in focus. "I need proof," I said.
You need courage, she replied. We left without hugging. The next grant application asked for measurable outcomes. I wrote, legislative hearings, police reassigned, safe house funding increased. True, in a way. My work had become a hammer. People swung it. Things moved. I convinced myself movement is meaning. Then the phone rang. A woman cried on the line. "My brother isn't dead," she said. I imagined the bakery, the flour on his sleeves, the simple life my story had erased. "Can you come to the office?" I asked. "We can come now," she said. "He is beside me." I told them to wait. I told myself I needed time. Time for what? To build a new lie that could hold the old one? Before I could decide, Roman sent a text. "Don't meet. Problem." He didn't elaborate. He never did. Fear spread through my chest like a slow fire. I picked up my coat and walked into the evening. The city breathed exhaust and rumor. Every billboard looked like a question. Every siren sounded like my name. I headed for the bar we used when we needed to be invisible. Roman was already there, a shadow in a booth. He slid another paper toward me, another solution. By now I knew what solutions cost. "Use this," he said. "It places your dead man in a gang." "I don't have a dead man," I said. He raised an eyebrow, the kind that asks if I've forgotten the terms of my own invention. "Then why are they coming to see you?" he asked. I looked at the forged sheet. I thought of the bakery. I thought of Tanya's silence and the fact-checker's kindness. I thought of the senator's trembling hand. And for the first time since San Gregorio, I felt the structure shake. Outside, a police siren wound up and held. Roman leaned in. "Decide," he said. "Either you protect the story or the story destroys you." I folded the paper. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I opened my inbox, another invitation waited. Panels, fellowships, features. The Fabricated War wasn't just a story anymore. It was a brand, and I was its reluctant prophet. They flew me to conferences in New York, London, Geneva. Journalists with badges shook my hand like I'd survived combat. Some asked for photos, others for advice. I gave them both, smiling like a man who knew where the bodies were buried. The irony burned slow in my throat. I bought a better suit, a better watch, a better version of myself. Fame didn't just arrive, it fit. And every time I stood under those stage lights, I told myself it was worth it. The applause sounded like forgiveness. In the dark corners of hotel bars, deals bloomed like mold. Editors wanted exclusives. NGOs wanted my signature on letters. Politicians wanted proximity to truth. Roman handled logistics now. He became my shield, my fixer, my undertaker of doubts. If something didn't check out, he'd bury it before daylight. Tanya's complaint vanished somewhere in the bureaucratic fog. A review, they called it. No findings, no closure, no trace. The newsroom owed her silence more than it owed me truth. Meanwhile, I learned the rhythm of indulgence. Morning guilt, afternoon interviews, evening seduction. I met women who said they loved brave men. I told them I wasn't brave. They laughed, assuming modesty, and kissed me harder. The lie became flesh. It touched me, fed me, whispered that I'd earned this. After all, wasn't I changing something? Didn't I give people hope, even if the hope was built on air? I began to believe that my fiction revealed truth, that every invented massacre illuminated a real one ignored, that false stories could expose true rot, that if reality refused to scream, I had the right to scream for it. That's the gospel of the ambitious. We confuse our echo for God.
My editor began calling me the conscience of the nation. A magazine printed my face on the cover, half shadow, half flame. The headline read, "The Reporter Who Dared to Name the Dead." I looked at it for hours. The photographer had captured something haunting. My eyes, tired but resolute, a martyr in monochrome. I almost believed him. Award season followed. At the ceremony, champagne blurred into flashbulbs. They called my name. The crowd erupted. And for a moment, I felt infinite. Not immortal, just infinite, the way lies can be. I thanked the truth as if it had stayed with me. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I walked through the city. Billboards flashed my own words back at me. Every corner smelled like gasoline and applause. It felt like standing in a cathedral built from my own arrogance. Roman called it dawn. "Press wants a new story," he said. "I know. They want something bigger. A confession from inside the cartel. Can we get it?" He paused. "We can make it." And we did. A man named El Pastor appeared, half myth, half actor. We filmed him in shadows, voice distorted. He spoke of massacres that never happened, of graves that never filled, of wars that existed only in my head. The footage went viral. Governments condemned, citizens wept, grants poured in. And I felt untouchable. Soon, I had assistants, translators, a driver. I wasn't chasing stories anymore. They came to me, prepackaged in reverence. I started signing autographs at airports. People called me the last truth teller. I smiled and let them believe it. The indulgence wasn't only fame, it was power. Real journalists pitched me their drafts for feedback. Activists quoted me in manifestos. I became the gatekeeper of moral outrage. It was intoxicating. The only person who didn't celebrate was my mother. She watched me on television, then turned it off mid-sentence. "You talk like a priest," she said, "but you don't pray anymore." I laughed. She didn't. When I returned home for her birthday, she had clipped one of my first stories, San Gregorio, and pinned it to the wall. Underneath, she'd written, "Remember who you write for." I tore it down before the guests arrived. Weeks later, Roman called again. "There's talk," he said. "Someone's asking questions about San Gregorio." "Who?" "An American podcast. They're fact-checking for a documentary." "Let them," I said. "They'll find what we left." "Be sure of that," he replied. His voice held the faintest tremor. But I wasn't listening. I was already on a flight to Brussels to keynote a panel titled "The Power of Truth in the Age of Lies." The irony didn't amuse me anymore. It thrilled me. Like walking a tightrope over a pit of applause. After the panel, a young journalist approached me. Her notebook trembled. "I became a reporter because of your stories," she said. Her eyes glistened with faith. I should have told her to stop before she began. Instead, I signed her press badge and said, "Keep fighting." That night, I dreamt of San Gregorio. But the town had changed. Streetlights bent inward. Water ran backward. And every window reflected my face. When I woke, the sheets were soaked in sweat. I opened my laptop and typed, "San Gregorio Massacre verified." The search results stared back. Empty. I closed it before the void could answer. Days later, Roman vanished. His number stopped working. His room emptied overnight. The police said nothing because I said nothing. He had become another ghost, one I'd made easy to forget. But the lie didn't forget me. It followed me in echoes. The mother from Tamaulipas, the man from the bakery, the scarred cousin, the photographer's silence. Each a thread tugging at the masterpiece I'd woven. I drowned them in noise. Parties, awards, bodies, interviews, each night louder, each drink longer. Pleasure became anesthesia, fame a drug I couldn't refuse. The laughter came slower now. The women stayed shorter. The applause faded faster. The same bar, the same faces, the same lie. I remember the night the power finally flickered. A journalist friend texted me. "They're reopening San Gregorio. Family filed official complaint. You need to comment." I stared at the screen. The room felt smaller. For the first time, I realized how quiet my own success had become. Every secret has a heartbeat. Mine was getting louder. I poured another drink, though it tasted like static. The lie was no longer my creation. It was a living thing, and it wanted to eat its maker. The TV above the counter flickered with a familiar name. Mine. An investigative podcast had just aired a special, The Fabricated War. They'd found inconsistencies, traced false witnesses, uncovered staged photos. They even found the bakery. The host's voice was calm, surgical. Authorities confirmed no record of a massacre in San Gregorio. Several families claim their loved ones were falsely reported dead. The reporter behind the story has declined comment. Declined comment. That was me. The silence I had built finally spoke louder than I ever could. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Calls, messages, cancellations. The conference in Geneva, postponed. The documentary deal, under review. The paper investigating. And somewhere between the notifications, one message stood still. From Tanya. They were never ghosts. You made them disappear. I turned the screen over and poured another drink. The whiskey hit like static. For days I didn't leave the apartment. The headlines multiplied like fungus. Hero or hoax? The reporter who lied to save lives. San Gregorio. The war that never was. Each article quoted someone who once quoted me. Each betrayal sounded familiar. Then came the knock. 3 dull thuds. I didn't answer. Another knock. Louder. When I finally opened the door, 2 officials waited. Gray suits, gray eyes. "Senor Vargas?" one asked. "Yes. We're conducting a verification audit regarding your recent publications." Audit, a polite word for autopsy. They asked about Roman. I said I hadn't seen him. They asked about the militia. I said my sources had vanished. They asked if I'd fabricated anything. I said, "Define fabricate." They didn't smile. After they left, the silence in the room was unbearable. I tried to work, to write something, anything. But every sentence I started ended with the same word. Nothing. Emails arrived from journalists I admired. Some angry, some disappointed, most cautious. They all wanted one thing: distance. One wrote, "I hope this isn't true." Another, "You were our proof it was worth it." The worst, "I should have known." That one I printed and taped above my desk. Not as punishment, as witness. The grant offices demanded refunds. The newspapers suspended me. The university revoked its award. It was all expected, like watching the credits roll on a movie you regret making. But then came something I didn't expect. A small letter, handwritten. No logo, no return address. Inside, "My son is alive because of your story. They stopped killing in our town after you wrote it. Even if you lied, the fear you created saved him." Is that still wrong? I read it again and again. Every time the question grew heavier. Was it? If a lie protects the innocent, is it still a crime? Or a confession of how broken truth has become? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe me. But belief is a kind of blindness. Days bled into weeks. I became a shadow in my own apartment. Curtains drawn, news muted, fridge empty. At night, I'd hear the city humming outside. Car horns, barking dogs, fireworks that might have been gunshots. The same sounds that once fed my fiction now mocked me. I dreamed of interviews that never happened, victims I'd invented, faces melting into smoke. When I woke, the guilt stayed, realer than any headline. Then came one last call, a number I didn't recognize, a trembling voice. "Senor Vargas? It's Anna from San Gregorio." I froze. "There is no San Gregorio," I whispered. "There is," she said softly. "You just changed its name." Her brother, the boy from my invented massacre, had been beaten 2 nights ago. Locals thought he'd talked to the reporter. He hadn't, because he'd never existed in my story. But my lie had reached them anyway, carried by whispers and screens. "Please," she said, "come see what you made." The line went dead. I took the bus the next morning. 7 hours of asphalt and nausea.
The real San Gregorio, different name, same wounds, sat beneath mountains that looked tired. Children played with plastic bottles in the dust. Men watched me from doorways with suspicion older than sin. Anna met me near the old church. Her brother stood beside her, bruised but alive. He wouldn't look at me. She did. "You made people afraid," she said. "Then you left." I tried to speak, but the words clung to my tongue like rust. I thought I was helping. She shook her head. "No, you were winning." She handed me a folded newspaper, the latest article about the scandal. My face stared back under the headline. "Reporter returns to scene of his fiction." Someone had followed me. Even here, the lie traveled faster than repentance. When I left, the bus felt heavier. The sun sank behind the hills like a secret I couldn't keep anymore. I realized then that stories never end. They just stop being yours. Back home, the apartment had been broken into. Drawers open, papers scattered, the computer gone. Roman's handwriting was on a note taped to the fridge. "You owe more than money now." No signature, just a smudge of ash. I didn't call the police. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, surrounded by ghosts made of ink and ambition. The lie had devoured everyone who touched it. Roman, Tanya, Anna's brother, me. When dawn came, I walked to the newsroom for the first time in months. The receptionist froze. "You can't be here," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I just need a desk." No one stopped me. I sat down, opened a blank document, and began to type. No adjectives, no heroes, no blood that wasn't real. Just a headline. "How I Fabricated a War." That was the story I never meant to write. The only one that belonged to me. It began with silence. It ended with it, too. I filed the piece at 3:17 a.m. The newsroom was empty, except for the hum of old monitors, like ghosts whispering in binary. The headline glowed at the top of the screen, "How I Fabricated a War." For a long time, I just stared at it, like a mirror that finally told the truth. The first line was the hardest. I wrote about the dead before I met them. Each paragraph hurt. Every keystroke felt like peeling skin from memory. But for once, I wasn't writing for applause. I wasn't writing to be believed. I was writing to be understood. I named names, mine included. I explained how ambition turned into method, how method turned into worship. I admitted that I wanted to feel necessary in a country that had learned to live without truth. When I finished, I didn't send it to my editor. I sent it to Tanya. 2 hours later, she replied with a single line. "Now you're finally reporting." The confession went live 3 days later. Not through the paper. They refused to publish it. A small independent site did. Within hours, it spread. Some readers called it bravery. Others called it vanity in disguise. Both were right. Television hosts debated whether I should be prosecuted or praised. Students dissected my ethics in classrooms. Politicians quoted me out of context. Everyone wanted a piece of the truth. Except the truth itself. I didn't defend myself. For the first time, I let the noise pass through me, like wind through ruins. Then came an email from Anna, the woman from San Gregorio. "We read your confession. My brother forgives you. I'm not sure I can. But people are listening to us now. Maybe that's something." I read it until the words blurred. Forgiveness isn't an absolution. It's an invitation to remember differently. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild quietly. No interviews, no panels, no grand explanations.
I taught writing workshops in a community center for journalists who couldn't afford journalism school. We practiced describing the world without adjectives. Facts, I told them, don't need applause. One afternoon, a student asked, "Why did you lie?" There was no anger in her voice, just genuine curiosity, like she wanted to understand the anatomy of failure. I thought for a long time before answering. Because I wanted truth to move faster than pain, I said. But pain doesn't follow deadlines. She nodded, and I realized she wasn't judging me. She was learning what not to become. The city changed while I hid. A new scandal replaced mine. A politician's fall. A cartel split. The news moved on. But I didn't. I still walked past the same newsstands every morning. Sometimes my old articles still hung in the corners, yellowed, fading like old graffiti. I never tore them down. They were my ghosts, and I owed them visibility. One night I visited my mother. Her living room was quiet, filled with the smell of soup and old radio static. She didn't say anything when she saw me, just ladled broth into a bowl and slid it across the table. After a while, she said, "You finally stopped shouting." I nodded. "It was never shouting," I said. She smiled sadly. "Yes, it was. We ate in silence. It felt like the first honest meal in years." Before I left, she handed me something, a clipping. My confession. Folded, creased, underlined. She had written one sentence at the bottom in her careful, shaking handwriting. "You finally wrote something true." That night I walked through the city again. The same streets, the same air, but everything felt different. The lights didn't seduce, the applause didn't echo, the silence didn't accuse. It just was. I understood then that truth isn't a thing you find, it's a thing you stop running from. When the morning came, I opened my laptop and wrote again. Not for headlines, not for redemption, just for the act of writing something that didn't need to be sold. The first line read, "This is how I learned that honesty has no audience." And for the first time in years, it felt enough. He still walks past newsstands at night. The old headlines stare back like echoes. His name blurred under layers of dust and new scandals. No one recognizes him anymore. And that, finally, feels like peace.
Sometimes he stops to listen to the street vendors shouting over each other, selling yesterday's truth at today's price. He smiles, not with pride, but with understanding. He used to be one of them. Now he carries silence the way others carry microphones. I live smaller now, a single-room apartment near the train tracks where the noise is constant and honest. No applause, no panels, no inbox full of invitations, just the hum of reality outside the window. In the mornings, I make coffee, open my notebook, and write about small things. A stray dog sleeping beneath a taco cart, a woman selling roses in the rain, a child drawing chalk outlines that mean nothing. The world is quieter when you stop asking it to notice you. Sometimes young reporters still find me. They come with notebooks full of hope, their eyes shining the way mine once did. They ask how to make a story matter. I tell them, don't make it matter. Let it be true. Most don't understand. A few stay long enough to listen, and those are the ones I write for now. One evening, I was invited, reluctantly, to speak at a small journalism school in Puebla. Not as a hero, not even as a warning, just as a man who'd made a mess and learned to clean it slowly. When I stood at the podium, the lights were too bright, like they always were. But this time there was no thrill, just a heartbeat, steady and unhurried. I told them the truth isn't sacred, it's fragile. It bends under pressure, softens under fame,
and dies in silence. Our job isn't to protect it. Our job is to keep finding it, even when it hates us for trying. After the talk, a student came up to me and said, "Sir, I still want to be like you." I looked at him for a long time and answered, "Then start by never being me." He laughed nervously, not realizing it wasn't a joke. The world has forgiven me in fragments. A podcast mentioned my name once, calling me a cautionary tale that helped change fact-checking standards. Politicians forgot me. Editors replaced me, and the outrage aged out of memory. But memory has its own calendar. Mine never skips a day. Every time I hear a siren, I still think of San Gregorio, the place that never existed but somehow lives forever inside the lie. Sometimes I imagine going back there, standing in the plaza, and saying sorry out loud, even if no one listens. Maybe that's what truth sounds like. Something you whisper to a town that doesn't know your name. I see Tanya sometimes, not often. Once, at a cafe, she walked past me, paused, then sat across the room. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. There's a kind of peace in mutual exhaustion. When she left, she slipped a folded note onto my table. It said, "The photo was never about you." It was about the light I kept it. It's taped above my desk now, beside my mother's old clipping. Both reminders that art and truth don't belong to their makers. People ask if I regret it. The answer changes depending on the day. Some mornings I do. I regret the ease with which I traded truth for applause, and the arrogance that let me call it courage. Other mornings I just breathe and accept that regret is the price of remembering. Because forgetting, that would be the real lie. Last week, Anna called again. Her brother got married. She said the bakery's still open, that business is good. Before hanging up, she told me, "We used to hate you. Now we just hope you're okay." I wanted to tell her I'm not, and maybe never will be. But instead I said, "Thank you." When the call ended, I sat for a while, staring at my hands. They no longer shake when I write. Maybe that's a kind of healing. At night, I still hear the city hum, the same rhythm that once carried my lies. It doesn't accuse me anymore. It just reminds me I'm still here. Sometimes I walk past bars where journalists gather, where the laughter is loud and the stories louder. I don't go in. I just listen from the doorway. The music calls, softer now. I smile, not to remember, but to forgive. The man who lied still lives inside me. But now we walk together.